I think it's time for us to open the floor to audience questions for a while. I have one question that I want to end up the panel with, but I'll hold it for a bit. Let's open the floor to your questions, your comments. If you would raise your hand. Going to make me ask my last question. Okay, my last question has to do with U.S.-Japan business. And, you know, U.S.-Japan business has actually been filtered through a relatively small number of people who understand both sides of the Pacific a little bit. And will big data change that kind of relationship and really make U.S.-Japan business more accessible to larger numbers of people, or will it be yet something else we can misunderstand about each other? How is U.S.-Japan business changing as a result of the advent of big data? Anybody on the panel? Dylan, you're closest to me.
So that's a really broad question. I'm not wise enough to answer the broader question of total U.S. business, U.S.-Japan business, but
Your own business.
I'll give you
Yeah.
okay. I'll give you our experience with regards to Japan. Japan is easily one of the most active and strategic geographies for us. And I highlighted some of the customer results earlier. There's something going on in Japan with regards to the adoption of big data technology that I would say is quite unique. There is a sense that across industries within Japan, big data is a very, very attractive prospect for leaders and emerging, innovative future leaders to take advantage of. And we are getting a constant stream of inquiries from very, very well-known household names in Japan, and we're also increasing our frequency of visiting, mostly to respond to and support existing clients and client prospects. And just one example of what's happening from our experiences. So Nikkei just launched their first ever big data magazine publication the week of April 22nd. Coincidentally, we were in Tokyo that entire week. And our first SI ever is actually based in Tokyo, named BrainPad. They've been in big data analytics for over a decade. And between the organic inbounds and the opportunities with our partner, we are extremely busy in Japan. The week that we were in Japan, we held 2 private receptions where we sent out some invitations, and it was a capacity crowd both nights. This is in the Marunouchi district, and all told, we probably met over 70 companies that week alone, and we are still working through the follow-up. So again, there is something unique going on in Japan with regards to how the industrial communities there see the prospect and the value proposition and potential for big data, and we are very happy to be active participants in that dynamic.
Thanks. Neil, how is your business changing with Japan?
Yeah, at least I'll go to my previous job with Guavas. Guavas, when I started, was mostly North American focused. In the last 2 years since I started, we've expanded into Asia and in Europe quite a bit. Japan's a market I don't think we've done much work yet, but even in today's discussion, I talked to a couple of people that were interested to better understand the type of use cases we're solving for U.S. telcos. So yeah, maybe this event will help create some momentum for us in Japan.
Okay, great. Jim?
Yeah, I kind of feel like big data is maybe following the same path as many other new technologies crossing the Pacific. You know, I mean, it's still somewhat at the early stage. There's lots of interest, but there's also a lot of confusion, risk aversion. So partly, I think, it just takes time to educate your partners or SIs in Japan so that then they can go and educate their customers. And, that just is an ongoing process. And also, going back to I think Kelly was talking about the size of the company too, there is a certain concern too that, a lot of the bleeding edge big data companies in the US might be startups, and it's true, sometimes we do have, I have gotten feedback from guys in Japan who are concerned, like, oh, it's too small, like they want to, they want to work with companies that they have a long track record, and sometimes that hurts some of the new big data startups in starting relationships in Japan that I've seen.
Yeah, I got to make a comment. Of course, some people, when I get requests for visits to Silicon Valley companies, they want to see a startup company like Google, right? So, it is, in terms of time depth, but in terms of sales and whatever. I want to hit the advertising in one thing. I know you're sort of staying away from that. But one of the things that I'm seeing here is just the incredible use of new approaches like real-time bidding in really changing prices of internet ads dynamically every 100 milliseconds or so. And the people who are aggregating all this data on the demand side and aggregating the data on the supply side, I'm not seeing that in Japan despite the amazing length of time that we've had mobile platforms in use in Japan for a lot of applications. Now, granted, smartphones are not as recent, in Japan as they are here, but mobile was really big in Japan. I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more push.
There's interesting points. I don't focus so much on Dentsu exactly, but my feeling based on how they operate is, one day off the record here, one day they'll probably just wake up and be like, oh, we'll just go and acquire 3 of the top companies doing that. It's when the switch all of a sudden flips when it reaches this critical point, and then they jump on it. But until then, it's hard to know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
But
The
those are great
develop
points.
model. Okay, thanks. Kelly?
Yeah, for us, it's there's a number of factors. One, it's a situation where people kind of talk about our industry changing. In Japan, the utility industry changed overnight. Anytime that you pull 30 gigawatts of generation offline, the industry changes very quickly, and they look for alternative solutions there. You mentioned the announcement today about the nuke gen not coming back online. Well, the way that they've filled that void is just from a massive, very fast-paced rollout of solar generation. But that's not a base load, so the sun only shines for a certain number of days, so you have to back that up with something. And we're trying to back that up with software. We think we can make things more efficient just by using each of these as a data point. Secondly, for us, a lot of the points that we get data from are in home appliances and automobiles. Obviously, 2 industries that Japan is very strong in, so we've had a big interest there. So, I think there's a couple factors in our industry that push things forward a lot quicker, so we've been rather fortunate. And the third one is that the industry in Japan is deregulating in 2016. So one of the things that now is we're not in a competitive market with most of our customers. They're effectively monopolies, regulated monopolies. But in Japan, any company will be able to sell power starting in 2 years. And so they're looking for competitive advantages, and they see big data and big data analytics as a competitive advantage.
Okay, thanks. I want to go back to something that you said earlier about smart meters. And certainly that's changed the data collection. But when PG&E first introduced smart meters in California, it was kind of not exactly done well. And a lot of people got really unhappy. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people were not happy. I think in California we're fortunate that we have a lot of early adopters. We also have a lot of people that publicly voice their displeasure about just about anything. So, a lot of when we go, if a new rate has to get passed, if it has to go through the regulators, they post it for a comment period. And there are people who will comment every time anything's posted, and it will be generic. They'll just say oppose. So, I think there was some of that, and I won't speak about any specific utility, but a lot of times, these are massive organizations, and not to say that the smart meter decisions are made in a vacuum, but if you were to roll out a smart meter program at the same time that you're raising your electricity rates per unit, at the same time that it's the hottest summer on record
People do
in
put
recent
those
years.
together.
You know, I've heard from some utilities that were rolling out smart meters that there was some negative reaction and people thought all of the overall energy bill went up because they had smart meters, so they would call and complain and the utility would roll a truck and they hadn't had a smart meter installed yet. So, you know, when you hear about that and you correlate that with an increased bill, you know, so I mean, and a lot of it's just education. I think after some of the rollouts in California, a lot of the AMI companies decided to get kind of a customer engagement representative, and they'll go into the utilities, assuming that utilities don't necessarily know how to educate their customer for a massive rollout like this, and so they'll actually put programs in place where they'll have community meetings and community feedback on those rollout plans.
No, I think that's a really important point, not just in the energy domains, but things like dynamic pricing that's used in the travel industry, right?
We deal with dynamic pricing in our industry as well, and I had so Australia is moving to a time of use plan countrywide. It's actually been postponed for a while now. The major problem is they've said that customers don't understand that a commodity can cost different amounts at different times of the day, which I think electricity is just about the only commodity that doesn't happen. So we would draw a correlation of, you know, this is kind of how the pricing works in our industry. If you told someone that they would pay 40 cents a gallon for gasoline from midnight to 6 a.m. and that same gallon of gas would cost $4.50 at noon, you would have a line of cars lined up at midnight to get gas. And that's effectively the same thing with dynamic pricing in our industry.
Okay, thanks. Knox?
Sure. In genomics, anyway, I see big data actually bringing Japanese institutions and American institutions a lot closer than they otherwise would be. It's hard to overstate the differences between the sort of Japanese healthcare system and the American healthcare system, but at least in genomics, I think you have subject matter experts in universities in Japan who, you know, up until recent years would have been sort of more isolated from the international community. So, and that works to the disadvantage of both sides. You know, American pharmaceutical companies, but the fact of the matter is, different people with different genotypes respond to drugs differently. So American pharmaceutical companies would not be able to have as robust an industry in Japan, and vice versa. You know, Takeda, Eisai, these guys wouldn't be able to come as effectively into the American market if there wasn't sharing and understanding of genomic data. I think in this particular area, it's tended to be dominated by American, Canadian, UK research institutions. And I think it's really opening up and it's bringing Japanese researchers into the fold, not just with Japan. Japan is probably on the forefront of that sort of non-Anglo world that's sort of coming into genomics. But you also see emerging countries like India and China also drawing closer. So that's a really positive development. Kind of transcends the screwed up local nature of everybody's individual healthcare systems.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, Sushi?
Yeah, I don't have such a broad perspective to discuss U.S.-Japan relationship, but for Integrac, it's very important. Although we are geographically based in Tokyo, our software is based on two prominent academic theories developed in the U.S. So we're unique in this point. So we are very much keen to strengthen relationship with people here, talented people, or advanced technologies that help to grow our business. That's why I come here all the way from Tokyo.
Okay. Let's try audience questions again. Go ahead, I saw your hand first.